I have Connor Whelan on with me to talk about three things we're optimistic about and three things we're pessimistic about for the 2026 Wisconsin Badger football team. Yeah, so I teased what we're going to talk about today, and I know we're in the sort of nether regions of the summer, waiting for the NBA draft and some of these sorts of things. But we wrapped up fall camp for Luke Fickell's Badgers not so long ago. Still have a ways to go before fall camp starts, but there are some things that we noticed, both of us. We had chatted about this previously. That happened this spring that we feel really good about, and then a few things that maybe give us some pause. So we're going to go through those, kind of rotating between positives and the negatives, and we'll kind of feed off each other. But yeah, man, we always love having you on, and ready to get rocking. Let's do it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Well, I will start with you then. Uh, Give me one thing you saw this spring, and it could be as specific as one player or as general as a position group or coach that has you feeling optimistic heading into the fall.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start off with kind of an obvious one, but I think both Cooper Catalano and Mason Posa continued to impress throughout spring. I think both this linebacker duo had a lot of, I guess, hype coming into the spring and coming into this fall. I think so far the hype has really been completely warranted. They've been playing great, and I think they play well off each other. And I just think that having two strong players up the middle is just huge for this defense. And I think it's really important to get back to that kind of traditional Wisconsin identity that people are looking for on defense.
I love that one, and it's massive having two potential stars, potential superstars. I mean, I don't want to go into hyperbole here, but we forget sometimes because they were so effective, especially in the second half of that season last year, that they were true freshmen. And the fact that Posa wasn't even there until fall camp, he wasn't one of those early enrollees, just shows you how much upside this guy could potentially have. And then the fact that there are a couple pieces around them, Tamara and Heiberger, that bring a little something different. I have to agree with you that that inside linebacking room for the Badgers looks really tasty right now.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that they've done a great job of developing both Catalano and Post, and I think both of them will look even better this fall, obviously, than they did last fall, which is always what you want to hear from two younger stars.
Well, it's good to be stout up the middle, and it's good to have guys that can also pass rush. And we'll get into some of these other things that may have gone the other direction. But I want to start with my first optimistic aspect is the cornerback room. I do not think you can overstate how restocked this room now is, right from coaching on down. And you got Javon Robinson and then Bryce West from the Buckeyes, Eric Fletcher. You had some guys that were already there, like Jameer Scott. You got Kai Bates coming in. And yeah, you lost a lot, like Holman and Fort Kareem. Fort Kareem was 2 years ago, but I have never, at least in the modern Badger era. When I say modern Badger era, I mean the era where we're not winning anymore. I don't remember as deep and talented a cornerback room as the one we have coming in. I'm not suggesting as a Jim Thorpe winner in that room, but it is a place where there are a lot of pieces that are tantalizing, I'm sure, for the coaches. And I think we're going to see a huge step up in cornerback play this fall. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this room is highly talented, and I think it was probably the most, I guess, surprising winner of the transfer portal. Like, obviously, quarterback and running back are the positions that people really care about here. And obviously, I think both Sama and Joseph are going to have huge impacts. But I think the fact that Dressel and the rest of this Wisconsin coaching staff was able to land guys like Kai Bates and Bryce West and, like you said, Fletcher, like, I just think these are all really talented players that all came from these high major programs already, and having them all come in and kind of bought into this identity at Wisconsin is huge, and they've all looked very solid so far. And I'm just excited to see how they look, I guess, matched in the same defense as some already talented linebackers. I think having the combination of a improved secondary and just a really tough up front and some really strong linebackers up the middle is going to be a really, really fun defense to watch this fall.
It'll be a good synergy for sure. I mean, they can feed off each other. Not that they obviously they do very different things on the field, but one being more effective makes the other one's job a lot easier. And another thing to note, I mean, besides Robinson, this is a super young room in terms of a ton of additional years left for most of these guys. So not only are we looking at higher, ceilings as far as potential goes, but we're going to have a situation where you're not just plug and playing. Guy comes in for 1 year, then he's gone, then you got to start over. And meanwhile, you have dudes who were recruited by Fickle saying, I'm not playing. As you know, that cornerback room has been a rotating door as far as the transfer portal on the way out. So that's very encouraging to me that we're going to have hopefully some staying power with this room and some development. All right, let's we're going to keep flipping back and forth. Give me something that you are pessimistic about after spring. And this doesn't have to be the death knell. It doesn't have to be the worst thing ever, but just something that is giving you concern. Ideally, something that you might thought was going to be a little better that maybe you're not feeling quite as strongly about as of right now as we are hitting late May.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, with all three of these, I'm just going to preface it by saying I don't think any of these three areas to be pessimistic about are that bad at all. In fact, I think actually all three are going to be pretty solid. It's just lower than expectations or lower than expectations from last year. So that's kind of where I'm starting. My first one is just the edge room. I think that we're starting off with high expectations after last season where Mason Reiger was just such a talented player and guys like Daryl Peterson really broke out at the end of the season. I just don't know if we have a true 1A guy in that room. I think younger guys like Nicholas Clayton can really break out and make some noise, but I'm not sure if it's going to be as defined as maybe a Reiger or a Peterson or even like some of those other players were last year. So I think maybe just the edge rushers might take a little bit of time to gel. So maybe expectations for that should be a little bit lower than what they were after last season.
Well, this is the most objective indication that you had a good answer. Is that was number one on my list. So that's that speaks well of you. Well, I'll flip to another one, and mine is Holton Joseph not hitting his ceiling, at least year one. So, I don't think, especially you're someone who is seeing some of those practices. Obviously, anyone who cares enough about Wisconsin football to be listening to this has probably heard some of the same things. And it's not that Joseph was a disaster in spring ball. I don't think anyone believes that he was. And I've heard a lot of wonderful things about his athleticism, his leadership, those kinds of things you clamp onto and you want those as a baseline. But the passing accuracy, I think, to be fair, appears to be at least right now a work in progress. So we'll see. I mean, obviously there's fall camp, but things are not going to get easier when you're facing Big Ten caliber defenses, when you're facing that Notre Dame defense in early September up in Lambeau. It's going to be a step up even from what this room that I was just talking about for the Badgers. So what are your thoughts on Joseph? Of course, with the caveat that this is not a completed bake cycle at this point. This is kind of more in vibes right now. But how does that wash over you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Joseph looked pretty solid by the end of spring. I think he made some really nice strides, and it was very encouraging to see that because obviously I think he came in a little bit raw just because anyone that has started most of their games group of five is not going to be up to that Big Ten level unless you really are a special talent. And I think that he made the strides he needs to obviously be the clear-cut QB1. Like, there's no question about that. There really hasn't been, but I'm glad that there's no quarterback competition going into the fall like we saw with even Tyler Van Dyke and Braden Locke a couple of years back. And honestly, I just think that by the end of fall camp, I think that Colton Joseph is going to be ready. I just think that obviously there's some accuracy issues, but even then, like, I think the biggest thing is just him staying healthy and us having some dynamic plays when it comes to the passing game. And I think that he can accomplish both those. And even though there might be some games where the accuracy is not always there, I think you trade that a little bit for having a guy that could have some really star-studded moments early on.
Yeah, I agree. And I wasn't trying to overstate it, but, one kind of other way of looking at this is if Joseph can achieve, it doesn't have to be anything spectacular, but a baseline of passing accuracy downfield. The thought of those safeties not being able to cheat up and then having his running added to the revamped backfield, and we're hoping an improved receiving room. That's something we may be talking about in a few. It's not hard to see a situation where that ends up being a really good Well, obviously, it's going to be an upgrade for the Badgers from the last few years, given injuries. So keeping him healthy is something we need. But yeah, I didn't want to sound overly negative about it, but and I think you raised a good point. The trajectory was heading upward as camp went on. That's something that's important to see. I know it was a little rough the first 2 weeks or so, and I think people were kind of grading on a little different curve then. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Joseph can do in fall camp, certainly when things are going to be a little more firmed up. But all right, well, I'm going to switch to another optimistic thing. I'll take the first one this time. And I'm going to kind of dovetail what you talked about. I'm going to say quarterback depth. And, it's the exact opposite of the problem that we had last year, which was a lack of quarterback depth when you were starting. And bless his heart, he's a gutsy kid I find it very, very easy to root for Carter Smith. He's one of the easiest kids to root for of any Badger I can remember recently. And the guts he showed and going out there and being a big part of why Wisconsin won 2 ranked games cannot be forgotten. But the fact that he's pretty much a consensus number 4 in the depth chart right now is, although it's not great news for him, a good sign when you have a Deuce Adams who had a lot of moments, you saw them. And then Ryan Hopkins, who I want to talk a little bit more about, had a prediction not so long ago. And people were mad at me because they thought it meant that Joseph was either going to be horrible or injured for a long period. I didn't mean that, but I just have an inkling Hopkins is going to get on the field a bit this year. I feel like he is your keeper if you do fantasy sports and you have a few keepers. He's the guy that you want as a keeper for the next season. And that's going to be very interesting to see how Fickell and his staff manages that dynamic. But anyway, I'm feeling good about that quarterback room, knock on wood. Still a lot of time left before that first snap. But Connor, how's that quarterback depth looking to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that Ryan Hopkins right now is anywhere from quarterback 2 to 3, and he's just been stellar according to compared to expectations in spring, just tells you how talented this quarterback room is. I think Deuce Adams himself is going to be just fine. Like, I think he'll be a very solid. I assume he'll probably be quarterback 2 to start the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Hopkins ends up becoming the second string. But I still think that Deuce Adams makes some really impressive throws. I saw one in practice, I guess a month and a half ago now, where he threw off his back foot and he threw a nice long pass to Jacob Harris, I believe it was. And that was a really talented throw, one of the best ones we've seen all spring so far. So I think even from 1 to 3, when it comes to the quarterback room, you have 3 guys that are all very talented. I think Carter Smith still has, obviously, ability with his legs and everything. I just don't know if the arm is there, and we saw that last year a little bit, but I really do think that from 1 to 3, the depth of this quarterback room is very encouraging, which is always nice because you know that there's always a chance of injury, which they've seen 3 straight years now.
Yeah, it's great. And it's not, I want to be clear from the outset here, I'm not making a comparison to situations the Badgers have had in the past where maybe there's an incumbent starter and then there's a hotshot young guy, maybe his name is Mertz, and then the fan base is kind of infighting about who they want to see as the actual starting quarterback, even though the starting quarterback from the previous year was really good. And I'm talking about Jack Cohen, Graham Mertz. I don't think I was wondering there. And it wouldn't, not that it's good, the dynamic's going to look exactly like that, but it wouldn't be the worst case scenario to have the kind of season where at the end of the season, we're looking at Colton Joseph and saying, wow, he was pretty darn good. He's as advertised with some upside still for him since he has another year left. He's not going to be an NFL guy. We know that after this year. But you have Ryan Hopkins there who's going to be looking for playing time. And I'm just saying if things go as well as we want them to go, that is going to be an interesting dynamic to watch in December. That's all I'm saying. Not a problem we have to face now, but keep an eye on that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think that there's a unlikely chance that Hopkins ends up starting for us even next season. But I do think that the progression would be 2 years of Joseph and then 2 years of Joseph. And then the team gives Hopkins the reins. I don't think that Deuce Adams is the long-term answer, honestly, at quarterback. I think he's here more for development and then maybe transfers out after this season, but that's just my prediction.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Okay, well, what's another thing you're optimistic about?
Yeah, I've loved seeing the run game so far. That's been very optimistic in my opinion. I think Abu Sama has looked great when he's been on the field. I think Brian Jackson's looked really good. Darion Dupree's obviously just continued being solid from last season, and even guys that aren't going to get as much snaps during this regular season but might be future pieces like Nate Palmer. Like these guys are all looking very talented. They're all strong runners. They're fast. They have great footwork, and they really know how to like follow tackles and find nice open holes. And I really think that this run game, just mixed with Golden Joseph having a really strong, obviously run game himself, and his arm being better than a couple of past quarterbacks Wisconsin's seen, and it's going to be a really interesting offense to watch, especially later on in the season when people are really gelling as best as possible.
And yeah, I mean, it'll be nice to have a running back room with depth. And again, much like the quarterback room, we all remember the running back room had significant injury issues that not only took guys off the field, but I think really hurt the development of a couple of backs. Dupree and then the kid who transferred out. I just think I felt very badly for them for many reasons, but the fact that they just couldn't stay on the field quite as much as they wanted to, and also when they're on the field, there was not really an offense to speak of to begin with. But I do think, kind of as an appendage to the running game, I'm pretty confident that offensive line is going to, not that the bar is very high, but it's going to look better than the offensive line last year, significantly better. And what I said, resemble a Wisconsin offensive line again. That is, it seems like a low bar, but it really isn't a low bar. That's actually quite a compliment. And I like Mateos very much. I'm a Mateos cult member, I think, to some extent. But yeah, I'm excited to see that. But that's going to be the linchpin of everything we just talked about. The running backs are not going to be able to run the way they want to. The quarterbacks are not going to be able to do the things we want them to do unless that offensive line is functioning. And if it looks anything like last year's, it's not going to function. But I don't think it's going to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think the run game just looks better already. I think the play calling is going to be more dynamic with a more deep and talented running back room. So I'm excited to see what it looks like, especially with Jeff Grimes, because he's obviously loves his running backs and his running game.
Okay, well, I'm gonna dip into the third pessimistic thing here. I love talking about the optimism things. I think we might have even wedged in four things there, which is good news because it happened organically. But the other thing I'm going to talk about that I'm not, I'll just say I'm a little pessimistic about. It's not capital pessimistic, but lowercase pessimistic. Is does this team have a winning mentality as embodied by their coach? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there were a lot of things last year that broke, unfortunately, negatively towards Fickle that he did not control. The running game, the quarterback situation. There's no way that team was 4-8 if they wouldn't have had all those injuries. They would have been much better than that. But there were still a number of things that I think we fairly observed from the coaching staff, and I'll just kind of use Fickle as the repository of all of it, where you're kind of shaking your head a little bit. And, maybe that was a symptom of things are just going poorly, and sometimes you pack it in, and maybe you don't take those timeouts at the end of the game to try and score against Michigan. But it didn't go unnoticed by fans. So my concern is only that even if we're clicking and we have the talent in those positions, are we going to see the Luke Fickell that we saw at Cincinnati, in 2021? Or is the Luke Fickell that we have seen at Wisconsin more indicative of who that guy is and who the staff is? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that I don't think that winning is something that is like it's within a player. I think it's just about the mentality of a certain group, and I think Fickle's really done a good job with at least this year's team, where he's trying to install those winning, I guess, attributes in everyone, just because they did have a lot of momentum at the end of last season. Obviously, winning 2 ranked games was a big deal, and even national media was talking about it. Like, it was part of the reason why Fickle got a little bit of leeway at the end of the season, because they saw, okay, when the young guys were playing and there was a little less injury bug every single week, they ended up having a great win against Illinois, and obviously a very odd win against Washington, but still a win nonetheless. So I think bringing in some guys that are new to the program and have the desire to win. I think guys like Colton Joseph are coming in and they're not thinking about what Wisconsin was like last year. Their mindset is just about what they can make Wisconsin like. And honestly, in his mind, he's probably thinking this is a program that should win 8 or 9 games next season, because that's just the way that the leader of every football team kind of just the way they are. And same thing, I think guys like Mason Posa, Cooper Catalano, a lot of those younger players that kind of led the charge last year and had like a little bit of they're kind of the spark plugs of the team. I think that they're bought in. Like obviously Mason Posa went on like ESPN Madison and he was talking about how he wants to make the college football playoff in the next 2 years. And I think that's the kind of mentality that a lot of these players already have. And maybe not every player is bought in, but I think the players that you really need to, that are kind of part of this core, are bought in. So I think that a lot of noise can happen this year potentially if everyone stays healthy, people make the development and improvements they need to make, because I think the mindset is there for a lot of these players.
Yeah, I agree with almost all that in the sense of a switch had flipped. I mean, we all saw that. I mean, we saw it, and Posa was one of the catalysts of that. And also, if there wasn't, I understand NIL can do some of the heavy lifting, but they got enough guys where at least I didn't interpret it as solely NIL. There had to be some message sold to these guys that at a bare minimum, this is going to be a place to develop your skills for the next level. But I suspect it was more than that, especially with Colton Joseph. We have a structure in place that can help you win, and to sell that with such a scarcity of actual evidence in 3 years, there was something impressive about that. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like I'm being cynical, but Fick is a little bit of a salesman. I mean, I think he has that ability, and I think his boy not being there anymore in Chris McIntosh. I'm not saying he wasn't coaching his best because McIntosh was there and has back, but there's something raw about this year. It's a real backed into a corner. Now I have some of the pieces I didn't have before. I'm coaching for my life here. I can believe it might be a little different version of him in the locker room. It's a version I would have liked to have seen earlier. But a couple of things that I did like is he's showing that even an experienced coach can grow and evolve. 2 things. One, recruiting in Wisconsin. Yes, 27 is a bumper crop, so it makes a lot of sense with no context. But the fact that he's like, you know what, you're right, building a wall against Wisconsin does matter. Look at the momentum he has. These kids are out actively recruiting for him all across the country with these other, peak players that he's trying to recruit. And several of them are super talented. That's big. And also him kind of saying enough. And it started a little bit with Grimes last year, but enough. Our identity is running. Hard-nosed football. We're back. If you just would have started with that in 2023, I think we would have seen a very different progression in how things have gone. So anyway, I guess that's something I'm pessimistic about in a sense, but I do see green shoots shooting through the sidewalk here that give me some hope for this year. And for the reasons that you articulated very well, I think there are a lot of dudes in that locker room, or at least a lot of high-end dudes, who believe they're going to win football games this fall. It's not delusional.
No, definitely. And I think to your point too, I think that at any level, I think running the ball and getting the ground game established is just a winning mentality and winning formula. Like you saw in the NFL this year, the Seahawks had an excellent passing game. Obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba won Offensive Player of the Year, and Sam Darnold had an excellent season and really carried them through the playoffs with some great games through the air. But if you look at it, they were the number 1 team when it came to rush attempts, and Kenneth Walker kind of became their workhorse in the playoffs. Like you really need a healthy balance, or even the opposite. You don't even need a healthy balance. You need to run to an extent where the passing game becomes secondary. And then at that point, it becomes a 50-50 game about whether or not to guess that it's a pass or run defensively. And that's when you really get some dynamic plays on offense. So, I mean, to your point, I think that Fickle probably saw the writing on the wall a little too late, maybe, but I don't think it's too late now. I think he's made the necessary change. I think this season could be very successful in that regard because he made sure to just reload in that running back room. He made sure to get the guys that will fit Grimes' scheme, including more tight ends for blocking, more tight ends even in the passing game. So I think that they have a lot of tools that could succeed and be a really talented football team next season.
Yeah, I mean, just one thought exercise is to superimpose that Minnesota game that ended. Yes, the weather was terrible, and that's a little bit of a weird thing, but to superimpose the guys we have in the rooms now in that game, Wisconsin wins by 2 touchdowns. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind
Oh,
if they have an
absolutely. I
offensive,
agree.
that was not a very good Minnesota team, and so it just really, I feel like the guys in that room. I can tell you, Mason Post. I've talked to Mason in the past. He was a guest on the show.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He probably has every game circled. Like he's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Not because he's vindictive, because he knew he was embarrassed. They were embarrassed in that game in Minneapolis by a team that's not any good. By the college football's most okayest football coach, PJ Fleck. You know, the guy's
Yeah.
he's a living, breathing embodiment of a 6 or 7 win December 26th bowl game. And hey, look, we haven't had that either, but we aspire to more, and that's why it's so important. But anyway, Connor, I think we've hit our numbers here as far as the things. I really appreciate your insight as always.
Thank
And
you.
you and I, I'm sure we'll catch up a little bit on some other topics this summer. But I'm super excited about fall camp. It's going to be really interesting to see how this team gels with a little more of the playbook opened up and things like that. But in the meantime, stay cool this summer and take care.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you, Scary.